All right, Wendy Powell, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you. I've been excited to join in and talk with you. So
Yeah,
it'll be
thank
fun.
you. Thank you for being here. Just for the audience's reference, you are Tom Powell's wife. And I've known Tom since college, so it's great to have you on to give a little bit of perspective of what you do and how it relates some to Tom in terms of what you've been doing and that kind of thing. But let me
Right.
start off by giving you an introduction for the audience so they know who you are and a little bit about your background. So, Wendy Powell, you are a certified Enneagram coach based in Virginia.
Yes.
You are a mother of four and also have been a foster parent. You
Yes.
have over 30 years in education, which is astounding. Teachers are phenomenal. They don't get enough credit for that.
Thank Yes, I agree.
Currently, you are the founder of Adventure 9, which is the Enneagram coaching. You're specializing in helping individuals and groups thrive, and you're empowering your clients through the Enneagram to uncover their true selves and enhance their personal and professional lives.
Yes, sir. That's right.
So, with that bit of information, like I said, I usually only have one scripted question, and that starts off the whole conversation. And that
Okay.
question is, where were you born, and what was life like as a kid for Wendy?
Okay. So I was born actually in Stuttgart, Germany. My dad was in the military. So my mom went over to visit him, and here I popped up. And so I was not over there long enough to even really remember.
Okay.
But when my dad was finished with the military and came back home, we settled down in Michigan. So that's basically where I grew up. And
Right.
that was where life started for me and everything that I can remember.
Right. So what age were you when you guys came to Michigan?
Oh, I was probably a year, maybe year and a
You're up?
half.
Okay. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
just really little.
Right.
My
So-
memories were not really, they really hadn't started yet.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. And
Yeah.
once you guys settled here in Michigan, your dad had retired at that point?
Yes, he was done with the military. Of course, he was drafted to begin with, and that's not where he wanted to stay. So he got
Okay.
out of the military, worked at General Motors, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I have two younger brothers, and we just grew up in Michigan, in Pontiac, Michigan, actually, Pontiac Waterford area, and just grew up very simple and very, I don't know, just easy.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't, just not overwhelming, not crazy or anything like that, but just I would say my life was very simple
Yeah.
growing up.
How was did you go to preschool at all or just straight into elementary?
I went to preschool. I went to actually preschool at a public preschool. I remember walking there when I was really little. I was probably 4 or 5. And then after that, they were going to put me in Christian school. Well, when I went, I didn't really know everything I was supposed to know. So I repeated preschool.
Okay.
How do you repeat preschool? I don't know. But anyway, I had to repeat it. And then I started at Christian school when I was really little. So, and then I went through all of my schooling was done at a Christian or private school. So,
Okay. And was that school in Pontiac or Waterford? Was it in that area or?
so it was out in Clarkston, the first one, and then we switched over to Rochester Hills
Okay.
later
And
on.
yeah, interesting fact for the audience too is that I was raised in Michigan for most of my life as well. And we're not very far apart in terms of where you lived and where I lived.
Yeah.
And then throughout school, when I eventually went to a private school, we would go to Rochester Hills, um, and go to different events that they would have going on, different speakers that they would have in. Um,
Hmm.
so we ended up getting to know quite a bit of the that community as well, just because of being in the Christian school organizations and leagues within Michigan. So super interesting that that was taking place. Didn't even know it myself until later on when reconnected with Tom. Um,
Yes, we may have even crossed paths. I don't know, way back
right.
then.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Exactly. Um, so going to the private school, the Christian school, it, at what point did you potentially see yourself as going into teaching? Was there anything specific about that? Was there a specific teacher that inspired you? Was there an event that inspired that? What was the thought process there?
so I did love my elementary years, and I would have to say I had excellent teachers. They all were just very compassionate, very understanding, open. Of course, you always have those crazy ones in class that want to get a little bit wild, and then the teachers have to crack down on them. But I think the biggest thing for me was just seeing how they were with the students. I've always had a love for children and a care for children. I don't know if that was kind of inbred in me, but I just feel like when you're little, sometimes you don't have a voice,
Yeah.
and you're not always understood.
Yep.
And I picked up on that even from when I was younger. Kids would act out in crazy ways, but you would hear about things that happened at home for them or whatever. And so they just don't have a voice and they're not always understood. So that was part of it as well. Just the compassion of the teachers and seeing different friends and knowing what they were going through, just had that compassion for children. So I think that's kind of where it started. But yes, I think teachers were probably the biggest part in that for
Mhm.
me.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Did you have difficulty in school at all, or was it fairly easy for you,
As
especially
far
after being held back?
Yeah, no, I know, right? As far as academics, I was an A/B student. I worked hard, like to get my grades. It didn't come like super naturally for me, like my brother.
Yeah.
So I had to work a little bit at it, but I, passed with flying colors, A's and B's, and so I was in National Honor Society. I don't know if that's even a thing, anymore, but
Yes.
anyway. So I don't know. It came fairly easily,
Gotcha.
as far as academics. Yeah, and I there were certain classes I enjoyed over others,
Mhm.
such as I liked my math classes, I liked art class, drama class, anything having to do with not having to sit there and figure out. But when it comes to diagramming in English, I enjoyed I enjoyed that. I guess because I was drawing lines and things. I don't
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but yeah. So there were certain classes that I enjoyed over others, but yeah, science and history,
Not so
not
much.
as much.
But you enjoyed the creative element of the classes
Yeah.
that were there, which is another interesting point that I see. Was there any thought of moving forward with potentially an artistic career with those?
Yeah, there was, but I knew what I loved was education, and I probably could have gone into art education or something like that just because I loved it. My mom is an artist. She loves to draw. She loves to create. That's just something she's always done. And I probably could have, but I think I loved a little bit of the structure of the classroom and helping kids and staying with that same group all the way through the year and just working with those kids. But anytime I had an opportunity to bring art or something creative in the classroom just to get the kids out of their seats or whatever. I tried to do that because I think I have a little bit of passion for that. So I tried to add that into the everyday for them.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's a great perspective because I think art has such a huge impact in society in general.
Mhm.
That when teachers are able to integrate that into the teaching elements of classroom, it makes things a whole lot different for the student.
Right.
It helps them learn in a different way than just a basic, here, read this material and then replicate it.
Yes,
So,
exactly. For sure. I learned as I was going through my psychology classes, which I minored in psychology, that there are different ways of learning. And I don't know, most teachers should know this, but not everybody is a learner just by reading.
right,
Some people can sit and read and absorb all that. And then you have those that just need to have hands on,
right.
right?
Yeah,
And need to be touching and feeling and, all the different things like that. So I try to incorporate those things. And I feel like, you have to do that as a teacher,
yeah,
but that's how our world is. We don't sit and read about everything. How boring would that? I don't
right.
want to say reading is boring because it's not, but if we had to do all of life that way, whoo, that would be tough. So it is important to incorporate anytime you can when it comes to the arts for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You said you had two brothers or one?
I have two younger brothers.
Two younger. All right. And what was going to school like with two younger brothers? Were you Were you were you kind of like the overseer, or was it a scenario of they're crazy and wild and you're trying to make sure you kept your distance?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Well, my middle brother, the one that was right under me, he was always so smart and just got all the good grades and all of that. But because I was 5 years older than him, I always was looking out for him.
Right.
And then my youngest brother came along 5 years after that. So I was 10 years older than him.
Oh wow.
So by the time he got into school, I was like his little mama, basically,
Yeah.
you know. So I definitely made sure he was getting to his class, or in the morning I would drive to school and make sure he, go now, go to your class, all those things. So I had a little extra added responsibility
Right.
being the oldest. And I think being a girl, I don't know, I think that you kind of have that nurturing
Yep.
aspect. So it kind of added to that. But yeah, kind of looked over them a little bit and kind of looked out for them, I guess. My
Right.
youngest brother, he was a little bit he had a lot of energy, that's all I'll say.
You had that third child energy.
Yes. Exactly.
Right, right. Um, did you were you into sports or anything like that going through school?
I played a little bit of volleyball.
Okay.
I played slow pitch softball, which I got to be the pitcher. That was something that was fun. And of course, we're playing Christian schools, which are very small. So I wasn't like a super athlete or anything, but because we didn't have a lot to pull from, I got to play on all the teams.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, and I did cheerleading. Now, I will say that was probably the most difficult one for me simply because I naturally am an introvert.
Yeah,
And so getting into cheerleading kind of forced me to be more loud, more
outgoing.
extroverted, more
Yeah,
outgoing and energetic. And so I think doing that kind of pulled me a little bit out of my box, out of my comfort zone, and kind of helped me, just be able to connect with more people and be, you know, out of that quiet place that I loved so much, right?
right, right, for sure. For sure. All right. So at what point in high school did you start thinking, all right, I think I'm going to go off to college, and then course, you start to think, where am I going to go? Which one am I going to go to?
Mhm.
What did that look like for you?
Um, well, I knew that funds were not, I mean,
Readily available.
I would have to pay for most of it for
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
So I could not readily get that. So I knew I had to go somewhere that was affordable. That was my first, like, okay, let's find that and check that off. And being from Michigan, as you all know, it's extremely cold.
Yep.
When we had someone come up and visit us from Pensacola, Florida, telling us all about how beautiful the beaches are, how nice and warm it is, how affordable it is, I was like, ooh, this sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
There were several people from my school also that had decided to go down, so that was nice. Being able to go with a tiny group from school, people I already knew,
Yeah.
going down as well. So I think all of that kind of played into it. But financial was probably the biggest thing because it was so affordable.
Right.
And they had a great education program, which is what I wanted to get into. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting with that. We had the same scenario. And actually, I think it was a scenario our school went to your school when those groups from Pensacola would come in, just because they would try to do one location and get the regional
Yeah,
other schools to come to those events.
right.
Um, so yeah, that's very interesting. And with that thought of, okay, you're going to go all the way to Florida from Michigan, was there any apprehension with being introverted?
Um, a little bit. Um, I would say a little bit, but I adjust pretty easily to change.
Okay.
So because of that, I'm like, okay, I'll be okay with this. And not only that, we could request a roommate. So one of my great friends was going to be my roommate. So it's almost like I was going, I had somebody else to kind of lean on
Yeah.
in all of that nervousness.
Yeah.
So that made a big difference. I feel like if I didn't know anyone down there and I was going all down all by myself, it would have been a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Uh, just because, I probably would have stayed in my room a lot and did some reading and
Right. For sure.
eventually, made some friends. But my circle, I like to keep small.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was kind of the same scenario for me as well. Even though I had people there and then two other guys that were going down with me, we ended up getting to room together. So that made it a little bit easier in terms of settling in.
Hmm.
But with all the rules and everything, like I was freaked out completely. And Tom and I had a big discussion about that.
All the rules.
Yeah,
There were a lot of rules
yeah.
for
And
sure.
what was wild is was that it was stricter than what our high school was. So it from that perspective, it was like another complete culture shock because I didn't start out in private school. I went to regular elementary school, um, public elementary school up until fourth grade, and then switched over. Um,
Yeah.
so it was definitely a culture shock scenario for me being there. Another aspect of that as well too is we were there at kind of different periods of time.
Hmm.
Pretty sure by the time that I quit going because I was in the same situation, I had to basically pay for all of my college on my own.
Yeah.
And I couldn't afford to finish out because I was failing everything except my art classes.
Hmm.
So it's like I can't keep repaying for these classes over and over again if you're not going to
Right.
succeed. But yeah, I think by the time that you got there, I was already um, had come back to Michigan, had left.
Yeah, because I graduated in 91.
Yeah,
So, yeah. So I was there in 91,
right.
the fall of 91. Hmm.
Yeah, and I left there. I did my last semester in the spring of 91.
Yeah.
So it's
We
kind of
just,
like revolving door,
yeah,
revolving door. So
that's right.
so you get there and your was your major education and your minor psychology? That
Yes.
how okay.
Yep.
And
Education.
so, education, got it.
Mhm.
How was that? How was it stepping into that? What was it everything that you anticipated and thought it was going to be and wanted it to be? Or was there some things that were like, okay, I don't understand why we're doing this, but yet it's part of the program?
Yeah, I think most of it was pretty good. I will have to say, going to a private Christian school, there were classes that I didn't feel pertinent always. There's those
Yeah.
Bible classes that you have to take and things like that,
Right.
that don't always be necessary. And then your general classes that you have to beat your way through and all of that. But once I got to the education classes, and I loved my psychology classes, I loved those. But once I got to that, I enjoyed it so much. And a lot of it was just understanding children, understanding, of course, the psychology classes, understanding people around you and how they work and why they do the things they do, and understanding. And we had one on just one class on marriage and family. And that was the whole class. And that was really interesting too, just the dynamics of a family and how it works and all of that sort of thing. We had another one on just education and psychology, and just learning about how to help kids in the classroom. Going back to talking about different ways that they learn and all that sort of thing. It was such a long time ago that I'm just trying to recall some of the things, but I loved those classes so much. They were a lot of fun,
Yeah.
so beneficial.
Did you did you delve into any sports when you got there as well, or was it just
Yeah.
focused on school?
I played soccer for my my collegiate,
Yeah.
which is like a girl
Right, right.
sorority. So I played soccer, and but that was it. I loved soccer. I love it. Well, I always cheered for it. When I was growing up in high school, and just I learned the game, and I was like, "Oh, this looks like so much fun!" And I love to run anyway. I
Yeah.
would do that a lot on my spare time, but I enjoyed that very much. So played soccer, played halfback.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, that's another thing we have in common. This is
Yeah,
soccer.
I love it.
Yeah. It's very very interesting that it had not been at that point in time, it had not become as popular it is today in
Yes,
the US, but it was wonderful. Um
it was.
love
And I
fun.
think too, we are, because our school was so small, we couldn't have the big football program and all like that. So we did the soccer instead. And it was great for our smaller schools. And I think, like, I mean, it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there were injuries, but not like football injuries. So that was nice. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was good times.
Nice. Nice. And did did you have any difficulties being away from home, being so far away, and then also to um, being in that environment of, kind of being told you have to do this and told that I have to do that in order to get through? Was there anything like that that affected you, or was it pretty smooth?
I would have to say simply because I grew up, the school I went to was very much like that.
Yeah,
Just very rules oriented. There were a lot of rules to follow, and even my own family didn't follow all those types of rules. You know what I'm saying? Like
right.
one of them, which was crazy, girls having to wear culottes instead of pants. Now, I bring that up because it sounds so ridiculous, and we realize today how crazy that really was.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was one of the things, and our school did it. They did it down at Pensacola, but that wasn't something my family did.
Right.
So it was just, well, you're going here, so everybody else is following that rule, so we'll just roll with the punches, right? And that's kind of how I am with my personality anyway, is kind of like, we'll just roll with the punches.
Yeah.
Even though it might not be always something I agree with,
Yeah.
well, in my mind, I'm like, well, everyone else is having to follow the same rule, even though I might think it's crazy. I'm only here 4 years. We'll just roll with the punches. So, just kind of my personality, I guess you could say, is easygoing. So, I don't really let those things that would bother some other Enneagram types, I can bring that up,
Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't bother me as much as some others, just because of my personality type. So that part of it was probably easy for me,
Okay.
more so than other people who are coming in, especially if you were coming from a more like a public school type scenario.
Right.
So
For
yeah.
sure. For sure. How was um how was it once you um got there and realized too you're having to pay for most of it yourself, you mentioned. Were you having to work on campus anywhere or off campus? And how was that in terms of managing doing that versus as well as carrying the school load of classes?
Yeah. So one great thing is they gave me like a little 1 year scholarship. So my first year I didn't have to work.
Nice.
Um, I still, there was still some that I owed on that, and my parents helped me with that little bit. So I kind of was able to get the classes under me and understand all about the rules and everything and that was happening. So I kind of got my groove that first year. And then going into the second year, I started work. So what I did was housekeeping,
Okay.
which was so fun. I
Right.
don't mind.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I did housekeeping for a little while, and then my last couple years I did floor leading, which is basically, I don't even, it's basically making sure things run smooth on the floor that you are assigned to. So that's what I got to do. So I did get to go and unplug some people's toilets, kill the cockroaches. If the rooms got too messy, I might have to write them up for a demerit, different things like that. So I did work when I was there. But I will say that probably working helped me stay on task.
Yeah.
Um, I have a really easy time getting distracted. I'm really easily distracted. So for me to sometimes stay on task, it's better if I have a schedule and set up for me. So I knew when I was working, I knew when my classes were, so I knew I only had so much time that I could fit my studying in.
Right.
So I think it was probably beneficial for me, to be able to organize that because I am not necessarily, I'm a little more free spirited, I guess you could say.
Right. Right.
Enjoying, I would much rather enjoy all the outdoors and everything around me, but yeah, it helped me stay on task, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your astrological sign?
Scorpio.
Scorpio. Okay. My sister's a Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right. Um, did you have to work when you came home on breaks, or were you
I
able to
did.
cover everything with the
No, I did work on my breaks. Worked at a lending company doing files and so boring. Nothing I would suggest for anybody as a
right,
future career. So I did that. I did some internship when I would come home in the winter with a couple different schools just to see, where I would want to be. Little did I know I would end up here in Virginia.
right?
Um, but I was able to do some things for my education degree. So I came home and did some things that would add to that those classes and that sort of thing. So
Okay.
I did work, but yeah, it was good. Things that not everything I loved, but you know, it
Right,
all worked.
right. Yeah, exactly. And at what point did you and Tom meet? Because I know through Tom's story that he got kicked out.
He did.
Did you?
He did all the rules.
Yeah. Did uh did you guys meet before he got kicked out or was it after?
It was after. So he got kicked out. The year he was supposed to graduate was when he got kicked out.
Yeah.
And so, which I'm sure you've heard the story. He was at the end,
Yep.
all A's, flying through the end of the semester and got kicked out.
Yeah.
So he had to come back and finish that semester. That's when we met
Okay.
because he ended up in the same room of my high school sweetheart that I had
Uh,
been dating since high school.
okay.
Yeah. So, and that's how we met. So when we first met, I was with my sweetheart, and he said, "Let me introduce you to my new roommate." And I just thought, oh, he is, what is wrong with him? Of course, he probably had.
That's what I said too.
I think he kind of had a little chip on his shoulder when we
Right.
out, and he was just like, okay, let me finish up this stupid semester that I had to come back for.
Yeah.
So, he didn't care about his roommate's girlfriend and meeting her and being nice or anything like that. So I was like, ooh, and I even told my boyfriend, I was like, I'm sorry that you have to deal with him the whole semester, right? Oh yeah, well, by the end my tune changed a little bit, but
Okay.
yeah, so we met that semester. I would call the room and he'd answer. Not that I would call to talk to him, but I'm like, okay, let me talk to my boyfriend and all of that. And so we crossed paths several times. Different things that I wouldn't say we became friends, but I mean we would do things together here and there. And then he graduated, and I still had 2 years left.
Okay.
So I sent him a graduation card. We started writing over that summer. And I think that's where it kind of took off with through letters, because of course it was way back in the ancient days when we wrote letters to each other and
Yeah.
could only make phone calls. So anyway, so that was where it started that summer. And at the end of summer, he came and visited me. And then I was like, I think I like him.
Right.
So anyway, so I went back to school for my junior year, and we stayed in touch that whole semester.
So
Um,
the other boyfriend, what happened to him?
so he ended up, I know, poor guy. Oh, I know, and he was a good guy too, just real sweet. But I just knew that he wasn't for me, even though I had dated him for a while. And
Yeah.
when you're in a small school like I was in, you don't
Yeah.
have very many people to choose from. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, great guy. Well, he ended up actually now I think he just retired not long ago, but in the Secret Service actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So he probably could have Tom taken out even somehow. I don't know.
Oh,
Oh yeah. So
Lord.
anyway, but he's doing good. He ended up dating and marrying a girl that was in my collegian, and real sweet girl, has a great family. So it all worked out.
Did you guys graduate at the same time, or was he ahead of you, or
We were the same.
same time?
We were
Okay.
exactly the
Right on. Okay. And when he graduated, did he come back to Michigan, or did he go off somewhere else?
same. So we kind of broke it off my junior year. So, I mean, I kind of kept up with him somewhat because, of course, he was from Michigan. But he was hired right off of graduating, and I think he went. I want to say he went straight to Washington.
Oh wow. Okay.
He had a little way in, and some people who were able to,
Open some doors for him.
Yeah, which was really great.
Nice.
So,
Nice. Very cool. All right. So Tom's in the picture, starting to find some interest here. And what, so that would be the end of your junior summer? Yes?
the end of my junior year is when he proposed.
Oh, okay. So he
Yeah.
performed pretty quickly then
Yeah, because
after
we
getting
didn't
to know you.
really start getting close until that fall. When I was like, oh, I think I really like him. I went and visited him in Virginia that my break over Christmas.
Okay.
That's the first time he told me he loved me,
Oh, wow.
and I reciprocated that with a kiss.
Right.
So, which was wonderful. And then I finished my junior spring semester, and then that summer is when he proposed. So, yeah, it kind of did go quick. I think when you know, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
for sure.
um, so anyway, so after he proposed, and he was at home working. Um, and I had that my last year to finish. And then after my last year, we got married in July after my senior year. And then he brought me right back here.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yep. So it was fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Fast. For sure. And two, the interesting elements of this is that you're you're going from Michigan to Pensacola, Pensacola, back to Michigan, back to Pensacola, and then now from Pensacola to Virginia,
Yes.
which is another probably contrasting environment of what Michigan was like
Oh,
growing
for
up.
sure. Yeah,
Um,
very much so.
was it was it a and it, at that point was it just an excitement of being together and being in love and knowing that we're going to build this life together. So I'm not as anxious maybe of being in a new state as well.
Right. I think probably so. I mean, well, it was hard for us because most of our dating time was spent those 2 years through letters and through phone calls, and that's all we had.
Yeah.
Very few visits. I want to say we saw, like, we were physically actually face to face 6 times, six, different times before we were married.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. So it was a big adjustment. Like I knew him, but yet I hadn't spent a lot of time yet, so I didn't really know him.
Right.
Um, so it was a lot of faith on my part, probably.
For sure.
um, Understanding that he was who he said he was, right?
Yeah.
But also, like you said, my family was close. All my family is from Michigan. So leaving everybody that I love and knew to come to Virginia was a little bit, it wasn't daunting or anything like that, but it just was maybe a little unsettling because I was coming to a new family who I didn't know very well. I was coming to a brand new job. I started teaching that fall,
Yeah.
right when I got. And so, his dad was a pastor, so a family of a church family who I had to get to know. And when you're a the son of the pastor and you're coming in like that, I felt like there were expectations probably that I wasn't ready for.
Yeah.
So that was something else. And then, of course, the culture is different here a little bit,
Yep.
you know, and the weather, I will say the weather I am completely fine with. That was one of the many, many blessings of moving to Virginia.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so there were not reservations, but there were a few things that, um, psychologically I had to work through just because there were so many different things
Yeah.
that, and so many new things. And when you're hitting like a new husband and a new family, a new job, a new culture, like all these things are hitting me all at the same time. I'm like, whew,
Right.
this is a lot. So anyway, so yeah, so that, I mean, but there was, the newness of being married and all of that was exciting. So it had both, and to balance that was, you know, it was
Right.
interesting. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. Did any of the psychology information that you had with your minor in school, were you able to lean into some of that and decipher some of those types of interactions you had to deal with at that point?
Yes, especially my students. I felt like it helped so much in going into education as far as like, knowing how to deal with them. And of course, most of them are country, as a matter of fact. Um, when I called my parents after the first month and a half, I talked to them in between, but they're like, your accent is changing. They're like, you're getting a southern accent. What in the world? And so I think it was being with those kids every day, and they talked like this, they
Yep.
had that
Yeah.
all. And so anyway, but just being able to teach them and understand them better, and plus and wanting to know their perspective, which is comes naturally for my Enneagram type. I think it just really helped with that. As far as dealing with the people who had expectations on me that I wasn't ready for, that's something I really had to work through,
Okay.
because my and of course I had that at my school, but my parents are super laid back and they never really put expectations on me.
Right.
So that was something that I wasn't used to, especially people who are close to me. So I had that was hard. That was difficult. Working through that, and even no matter how many psychology classes you go through, when you're in the thick of it yourself,
Yep.
it's not always easy to apply those things.
Right.
Um, and sometimes you almost just need a voice or an ear to hear what you have to say, and just to be a listener, or just to be somebody who can say I understand. And so for anybody that's gone through anything like that, they have such an opportunity to help walk other people who are going through difficulties or traumas or hard times. They have that ability to do that. So I don't want to negate, like, this is not a good thing to have to go through these trials, or something that might seem difficult, because you have that once you go through it and you're like, yeah, I came out on the other side, I'm still alive. You
Right.
can help those other people, which is huge.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that perspective is it's empathetic because of the fact that, as much as we hate going through the hard times,
Mhm.
a lot of times they make us stronger and give us more wisdom to be able to deal with things later on,
Right.
especially if it's helping somebody else.
Mhm.
While you were dealing with that, um, I imagine as well of just basically going from Pensacola straight into Virginia, you don't have a whole lot of friends in Virginia. You just have newly found family.
Yes, I just had newly found family, so he was pretty much all I had when I moved here. I didn't know anybody else. So, and I'm not one to go out and make friends easily, because I
Yeah.
like to keep my group small. So, I kind of leaned into him for that. And of course, if you know him, he has an easy way of making friends with all the people.
Right.
He's a great networker and all that sort of thing. So I think I kind of rode on his coattails for a lot of that, especially like with church, the church that we went to, and his dad already being a pastor. There were a lot of people who just embraced me simply because I was, part of their family.
Yeah.
So that was helpful, and I didn't have to work on that alone by myself. So there was already somewhat of a connection because of who I was connected to, which made
Right.
it. And of
Nice.
course, then going into a new school and meeting the other teachers, that was, and and collaborating with them, talking about different things, that was another connection that I was able to make. So between the job that I had and the church setting that I was in, I was able to make some connections, which I was grateful for because
Right.
I didn't know how it was going to work.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Was the school that you started teaching at, was that a Christian school or a private or a
It was a
regular
Christian
public
school.
school? Christian
Yeah,
school?
Christian school. Yeah, and it was a small school. It was a startup school. So it's not like I had 30 kids in my classroom. It was super small, which I loved because I was able to do a lot of individual with my kids. If
Yeah,
I saw them struggling in one subject area or even behaviorally, I was able to, just be with them on an individual basis as
right.
needed. It wasn't so hard. So I actually really loved teaching. It was fun.
Nice. Nice. When at this point you're in the thick of teaching, you've Tom's got did he have his own business started at that point or is he working for somebody else?
Yeah, he was working for someone else for a little while. I want to say after we were married, probably about 3 to 5 years. I'm trying to remember how long, but it wasn't long where he was like, I can do this.
Right.
And then he ventured out on his own. So, yeah, I want to say between our first three, after 3 years,
Okay.
I, I think it was around that time that he had his own business.
Got you. And then was there at that point was there any feelings of extra pressure on you with him starting his own business and potentially um, having a lag in an income scenario at that point in time, or did he already have enough client base to where it was kind of a smooth transition?
Yeah, I think he had a fairly smooth transition. I think it was a little bit tight, but our we we didn't have very many bills, and if anything, they were very small.
Okay.
So that was helpful. My little salary I made at a Christian school wasn't much at all. So I want to say it was maybe 16,000,
Okay.
very, very minimal, but we had everything we needed. I felt like I'm not one to worry. I just know we'll always be taken care of. Like, and if we have to sell everything and move into a teeny tiny apartment, we'll roll with the punches. So that was always my perspective on it. Now, he, on the other hand, may have felt differently, and actually, it's not anything that we've ever really discussed, to be honest.
Okay.
No, unless I'm like, is something wrong? Are you worried?
Right. Right.
Then we'll talk about it. But yeah, knowing his Enneagram number, they don't always share all those things. So kind of keep it wrapped up inside.
Yeah,
But
for
yeah,
sure.
so I think it was a
Okay.
smooth way.
And um did you work for that school the entire time of your teaching career, or did you switch and pivot, or
Yeah. So I worked for them for 4 years and then we started having kids.
okay.
And then they were coming one after the other, like every 2 years we were having kids. And so I was like, whew, I can't keep teaching and, keep a handle on all these because it was a girl and then three boys and it got crazy. So I took a pause. And then after that, I went to a different Christian school for a little while, taught some different subjects and different things. We homeschooled for a little bit, which that was fun.
I can imagine.
We did that for 2 years and phew, I was glad to be done with that. After that, I went back to teaching at a different Christian school and just really enjoyed it. I actually taught some different classes, like I taught elementary art, I taught drama in the junior high age. And so I got to use some of those artistic things that are deep down inside.
Yes.
A lot of fun. I enjoyed that very much. Actually, music was the one that I got to teach for elementary, so it was enjoyable for me. So
Very nice. Very nice. So that creative spark that was in you back in school, in elementary school, and then also too seeing your mom do that work and be creative as well. You had the opportunity to move in and teach some of the creative elements, the music and then the art classes. So that was allowed to come back around kind of full circle for you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I loved that. I love that I was able to do that because growing in actually in high school and different things, I was like in choir and I did different ensembles, did a lot of different singing groups and different like I got to play the bells, like all kinds of fun musical things, which I really enjoyed. Sang in the choir at church and did specials and fun things like that. So those things were able to come out, in later on in life, which I didn't, expect, and I
Right.
was grateful that I was able to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's fun.
Very cool. Very cool. When you were doing the art classes for the kids, were you able to see um, different elements within those kids of where maybe they excelled in the classes and you were able to help nurture that, or were there some that were just not really understanding it, and so you maybe had to help them more? Um,
Mhm.
how was that perspective?
Yeah, for there were different, like some loved it. You could tell the ones that are just it's almost like in their bones, you know what I'm
Yes,
saying? And
yes.
enjoyed it so much. And then you have some that are such perfectionists that
Mm,
if they didn't make it look exactly how they perceived it should,
yeah,
then they were frustrated,
yeah,
you know. And so then you have those types, and then you have other ones who it was fun to watch the ones who were creative that made, normal things that you would say like, dogs, they're normally like brown and tan and black, and this dog is purple, so you come up with those that are they're digging into their even more creative and pulling out, well, I know that's what they're supposed to be. Dogs are supposed to be this color, but mine's going to be purple.
right.
So it was fun to watch the different children and the way that they perceived their art, in the way, and a lot of it is comes out in personality.
Yeah,
You find that there are certain types who just it comes easy for them and natural for them, the arts and the different types and the ways that you can create. And then there's others who, like I said, like the ones that look and say, oh, this does not look good. This is not perfect. I have to redo and, erase and rewrite or erase and redo that score that I just, that music I'm writing. And so, it's just they're different personalities and it definitely comes out in the art, which
yeah,
which now that I know that, now that I know about the Enneagram and all those different things, you can see it.
right.
Um, Especially as they're working on it. Maybe not necessarily the final outcome, but yes, it was neat to watch them.
Yeah, I can imagine that the perspective of that is just very interesting. And especially for me, being an artist and also being one of those kids that was a perfectionist early on and
Mhm.
wanted it to be a certain way. And if it wasn't that way, I wasn't satisfied with it. But also too, you got a husband who is in the creative world,
Right.
doing advertising and different things like that.
Mhm.
What was it like when you were teaching those kids during the day, and then you come home, your husband's been at work all day creating as well. Did you have conversations about, what these particular kids were doing? Um, what was his thoughts on that based of what you were seeing, any of that type of stuff?
Yeah, so I would have opportunities to show him that, and it probably happened more so with our own kids,
Oh, okay.
as they were doing their own creating and their own, and a lot of it came out, and we were actually surprised. One of our boys took an art class, and he was amazing. And Tom was like, where did this come from? And it just seemed to come so natural for him. And
Right.
so we did discuss, but like he would come home and we would talk about logos that he was coming up with. And he would always be like, okay, so what's your opinion on this? Or what's your thought? Because I'm a very visual person.
Okay.
I can look at something and see if something looks off or if something looks wrong or right. I like it to be pleasing to the eye, just really, or to catch the eye or to pop out or something's got to happen here. And so he would always talk to me about those things, which I loved because I never had a hard time giving my opinion about those things,
Right.
because now if I had to read something and like go over and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's probably fine. I didn't have much of an opinion here or there, but when it comes to something artistic or a drawing or a scene or a logo, I just it came easy for me to have an opinion about it.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I'm not super opinionated, so
Right. No, exactly. Exactly. Um, yeah, and you have a huge heart too, so you're you're not quick to give hard criticisms. Um,
no.
which which kid was it? Because I've had the fortunate pleasure of being able to come and stay with you guys for a period of time, and Tom and I discussed that and got to know the kids. Um, and they were fairly young at that point. I think Jules was maybe 12-ish
Mhm.
around then.
That's probably about right.
Yeah,
So when they're all right at 2 years,
right,
so
right.
12, 8, and then 6. So they were
Yeah.
young.
So which one was the creative? Was it
Jude.
Jude?
Jude was the one that surprised us. Now, Julia, she did take an art class and she's actually really good too. She's very, very creative.
Okay.
She's a lot like her dad.
Yeah.
And she can draw and she can come up with some things, but Jude surprised us.
Mm.
We didn't know that that was even in there. And he's probably my quietest
Yeah.
child.
Yes.
Being the youngest and having older siblings or he's my quietest one, but when he came and brought some of his work home from art class, we were stunned. We were so surprised. We were like, dude, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So he has that artistic bent, and he enjoyed that. He ended up taking a second art class in high school. So yeah, he was a surprise.
The youngest
Youngest.
is the
Yep.
surprise. That's wild. Yeah, I remember Jude was um so introverted
Yes.
when I was there with you guys
Mhm.
that it was almost as if I said anything to him, it scared him to death. But there was cool moments where I could relate to something that he was doing, and I would say something about it, and he would open up a
Mhm.
little bit. So that was cool. I love all your kids. They're amazing, and it's
Oh,
been amazing to watch them grow, and now starting to take on careers and all of that type of stuff. It was a cool experience for me to be around them because I could see so much of you and Tom both uh, in them at certain points in time that they were doing things,
mhm.
um, as well as the individuality of each one. Um, and I ended up giving them nicknames and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Well, they still call you Uncle Rich. Yeah,
yeah.
you're known as Uncle Rich. You'll always be Uncle Rich.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Um, so you're doing the schooling, you're in and out of homeschool back to regular classroom. Um,
Mhm.
at what point did you decide, I think I may be wanting to do something else?
Um, it was it was when the kids were getting into high school.
Okay.
And we decided to switch schools for them. And I did do some subbing and that sort of thing, but it was the requirements of teachers today is just a lot.
Yeah.
What they put on teachers, and not only that, but if you don't have an administration backing you up and there to help, it's hard. You're dealing with kids that sometimes are, you know, just really difficult to work with, or you're dealing even with parents who, don't understand why you would implement something or understand why you would have them do such as an assignment or that sort of thing. And so it made it hard because you felt like you were fighting for what you were trying to do for them,
Yeah.
which is to help them.
Right.
And so it got to me, it got to a point where I was not enjoying it
Okay.
as much. And I think it was because of all of the it wasn't necessarily because I wasn't getting support from the administration, but you lose so much when you're having to, the teaching time, the working and dealing with parents and dealing with issues with the children become more than just being in the classroom and being to help these kids and teach them and want to help them grow and keep moving forward. So that became frustrating for me. And
Right.
so that's when I was like, I think now is the time for me to step back and
Yeah.
just look and evaluate where we're at and see what we want to do from here.
Yeah.
So yeah, so for all the teachers who are still teaching, oh, God bless them.
Yeah. It's it's a very strange time right now for teachers across the US in general. Um,
Mhm.
it, it's yeah, that is what it is. We'll,
Yeah,
let's stray
agreed.
away from that.
Yeah.
Let's stray away from that. Um,
Yeah.
did did you decide I'm just going to, just going to be a mom at this point? I'm going to take a bunch of time off. I don't really want to jump into any other type of career. What was your thought process with that? You just needed a break.
Yeah, I just needed a little bit of a break. I knew that my kids entering high school after that, that's it, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to be able to take the time to pour anything else into them that I could possibly pour in. So they were my top priority at that point. I just wanted to be there for them if they needed anything, if I needed to bail them out of jail. I don't know. I didn't know what was
Right.
going to come. So,
That's
so,
hilarious.
so
What's even
I
more hilarious about that is I told Tom when reconnected was that uh, I thought that he was probably going to have been in jail by the time that he got out of college. And that came up in the conversation the other day. It was like, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. But he phenomenally proved me wrong and incorrect. Uh,
yeah,
and that was
surprisingly.
fantastic.
I had to keep him on the straight and narrow, Rich. I had to try to keep him like
He was a wild boy.
I had to rein him in with my fishing pole.
He was a wild boy.
Yes, he was. Oh my goodness. I had
Uh,
no idea what I was getting myself into. No, it's been great. So, yeah, so at that point, I was just focusing on my kids, enjoying them. And so during that transition time is when I started getting interested in fostering.
okay.
And it went back to just caring about kids and hearing about their struggles and knowing the things that they go through and how they're put in these situations. It's not their fault.
Right.
And so we moved forward to be foster parents, and that's when my kids are was they went when they were in junior high and high school is when we decided to foster, and we got our first little foster baby.
All
So
right.
yeah.
And how is that in terms of we know from a psychological standpoint that that can affect a child in many different ways. Um, when they're taken from their natural home environment for
Mhm.
whatever reasons, whether it's good, bad, ugly, and brought into another family, and it being not necessarily a traditional, two kid family. You got four, so it's a
Mhm.
little bit more going on. What was that dynamic like in terms of, was there any resentment from your kids towards the foster child, or and or potentially vice versa, or was it a scenario that the foster child was to the point where they're so young that there wasn't a whole lot of that in play?
Yeah. So when we signed up, because we had four older kids, we decided to sign up for infants
Okay.
because we thought that would be the easiest instead of bringing someone in that would maybe not get along with our kids or something like that. We already had, it was already crazy at our house.
Yeah.
So we wanted to sign up for that. So that's what we did. So because of that, our kids had the opportunity to care for these infants, to love on them, to feed them. You know, my boys knew how to carry babies, they knew how to change diapers. You know, Julia was like a little mama. She loved carrying them around, changing their clothes, getting them dressed up, all those sorts of things. So they had the opportunity to learn how to become a parent almost, or learn how it is to have a baby. Maybe help them think, oh, I'm not ready for this anytime soon, right?
Right, right.
So give them those opportunities, and actually to see them love on somebody that needed it, and it's almost like they became a member of our family, and they were loved on, they were cared for, they were fed. So that part of it was really cool. But I will say that when we went through our classes before we were able to be certified as foster parents, we there were a lot of videos and education that we had to go through. A lot of those kids that come out of those situations, every situation, of course, is different, and the kids, depending on their personalities, are going to be handling it different. So some will act out,
Yeah,
some will be frustrated, or some will withdraw. So there are different ways, and when those things happen, it's almost like it's magnified.
yeah,
And there are kids that, even though they were in abusive situations, it's almost rather because that's their comfort zone. It's almost rather that they wish they were back in that,
mm,
because that's their comfort zone, instead of coming to a family they don't know, they don't understand. Why am I here? All those sorts of things.
right,
So it's a lot to deal with, and I didn't think that our family dynamics were ready to deal with that at the time. So we stuck with, and even the babies that we did receive, like, they would have to go through withdrawals and that sort of thing. So those things were difficult. Even, being older and having to get up in the middle of the night and feed them and all those things, it was physically exhausting for us, but it wasn't emotionally and mentally as exhausting as if we were to have an older one.
right.
So, yeah.
That's fantastic. And again, too, that speaks to your heart, Tom's heart, such huge hearts, loving hearts, and desire to help others too. Um, it's amazing. Um, Flowers to you guys both. It's wonderful that you and people who are doing that within society, who are truly interested in the well-being of the children. My hat's off to that, just because it's a godsend, because there's so many instances where the child doesn't get that nurturing element within their own natural family, and to be able to get that from somebody else, it literally changes lives and trajectories of lives. So
Mm-hmm.
again, flowers to you guys for that. Uh, did you guys do that for quite a while? Are you still doing it, or was there a point where you decided, you know, maybe we want to try and do something different at this point.
Yeah, so we did that for 5 years. We had two different ones, and we had them for lengthy amount of time. So I after we after the one our last one left, it was really hard on me. I had a really hard time because we had had her for so long, and we even considered the possibility if they came to us of adoption.
Ah,
That wasn't off the board or off the charts. So anyway, we had talked about it, thought about it, and then a relative stepped up and stepped in, and she was able to go with him. So at that point, after having her for so long and treating her as if she was our own, we got her 9 days old. It was really hard. It was I was heartbroken when she left, and so I think that was the hardest thing um, of going through that and knowing that, okay, if we do this again, there's a potential of that again. And I just don't think I could have gone through that another time.
sure.
Um, yeah, no, if I knew that we could have them for just a short time, and come and then get them back to where they need to be, or with a family member or whatever, I could probably do that. But to have them for almost 2 years was
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was like, Whew, let's let's take a break. And it all happened right around the COVID time anyway. So when COVID was happening, they weren't able to make their regular visits normally that they would make to make sure the home is safe and all that sort of thing. So if you didn't have a child at the time, it caused our certification to lapse and our licensing. So we were no longer like able to take any in unless we went back and redid the classes and all that sort of thing. So I'm like, okay, it all worked out anyway, you
Yeah.
know. And that was a really hard time too for the foster system during COVID. It was really
Right.
difficult.
Oh, yeah. Most definitely. It was a hard time for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Craziness.
Yeah.
Craziness. Um, when did the Enneagram come across your purview, and what was was it during COVID that took place?
Yeah, so actually, I was introduced to it a little bit before then, a couple years before then. Actually, someone at our church was using it to go through, find your number, and find out what maybe where you would best like to serve
Right.
at church. So I was like, well, that's really interesting. Now, I never did figure out where I needed to serve, but I did take the test and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I started reading about my number and I was like, holy cow, that sounds just like me.
Right.
It just really pinpointed me down and said so many things that I know about myself, but never really knew about myself. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So I was introduced way back probably 7, 8 years ago to it, but it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I was like, ooh, this is really interesting. I really would like to get into this more. And I picked up a book, read it, thought it to be, this I can do. This is so helpful.
Yeah.
And after I read it, I thought, gosh, I wish I knew this when my kids were younger. It would have
Right.
made it so much easier for me to understand them.
Sure.
So that's when I decided to go forward and take the classes, and become an Enneagram coach.
Okay. And so for the audience who may not know or have not heard of what the Enneagram is, can you give kind of a broad spectrum overview of what is the Enneagram?
Yeah. So it sounds crazy. Like, what in the world is this? Even the name of it. And a lot of people compare it to other personalities,
Yes. Yeah.
questionnaires, all
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And there's a lot out there. There's DISC and Myers-Briggs and on they go. I think the difference between those ones and this one, not only do you find your strengths and challenges, but you find your motives, your fears. it goes a little bit deeper than just those surface things that other people see, that why you're making these decisions. Well, it's because those motives inside or those fears inside that's causing that,
Right.
so that's the difference between the Enneagram and other personality platforms. What the Enneagram is it's a personality overview of how we're wired on the inside, different personalities, and it breaks it down into motives, your fears, your desires, different things that come from the inside and are going to come out. And that's where your strengths and your weaknesses come in. So it's basically an overview of 9 types, and everybody falls into one of those types. So you were born in that type, okay, from when you were little. And then, so it's not created or it doesn't come from your environment. It doesn't come from somebody who has an influence over you. It is innate in you from the beginning. But different factors can cause you to be healthy in your type or unhealthy in your type. It also has things that are called wings, which are on either side of your specific number that you can lean into here and there. That does affect your type as well. So I don't know if I'm explaining it very well,
Yeah.
but it can be very deep. There's just so much information about it and how it can help you. But that's kind of an overview of what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're explaining it well, definitely. The way I've looked at it, when I first learned about it was the fact that it's almost similar to an astrological birth chart. The astrological birth chart kind of gives you a broad spectrum roadmap of what your birth sign is based on your birthday,
Mhm.
what your astrological sign is, and then that has its own elements of personality and different things like that. And then based on planets and stars throughout the course of your year, lifetime, it gives you that basic information of, hey, this can potentially come up, need to focus on this, or you need to look at this or pay attention to this, or if you've gone through difficult times, well, this is the reason why, because this is how your chart was laid out. This is what you were experiencing then. It's kind of similar with the Enneagram. You've got that innate personality elements that are there that
Mhm.
play out through your life. And depending on different directions that you take in life, it can be, amplified to the positive or amplified to the negative. And those wings are the complementary elements that come into play as well. Um, so in, it's another aspect of being able to understand yourself from a designed perspective. And even coming from a psychology standpoint, it helps you understand elements like you're saying what your core fears are, those types
Mhm.
of things. If you're going through life and you have these fears that are really like holding you back from a whole lot of life experience or anything, that's going to affect how your life is operating. Um,
100%.
so understanding those things, and if you can understand them early on in
Mhm.
life, it's a lot easier to navigate life. And I've found that out when I first learned about the astrological birth chart. I knew about astrology back when I was young, and what my birth sign was and all that kind of stuff, but never really got into it a lot. But once I did have my birth chart done by an astrologer, and she was a third generation astrologer. She's just turned 94 this past year and is still doing the work.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, it gave me such an aha moment in understanding of what my life had been like up until that point, and then what the potential could be moving forward. So I think it's fascinating that there's just another element that can be taught to people, explained to people, and it's not a whole lot of difficulty in figuring it out and also to giving that information. Um,
Yeah, you're
it's
exactly right.
it's not oversaturated with psychology or elements that make it too confusing. It's pretty straightforward of this is this, this is this, and this is this.
Right.
Um,
And that one
so
of the things too I like about it, it is simplistic, but it also, it says, okay, here's your type, but you don't have to stay in that box of your type.
right,
Once you learn about those things that are keeping you in that box, let's try to get you out of that box. So if you, for instance, for me as a type 9, I struggle with wanting to keep the peace no matter what the cost is. So knowing that about myself and fear of conflict, it affects a lot of decisions I make or don't make. But knowing that helps me to say, okay, I need to get out of this box and I need to speak up and I need to say what I'm thinking. So when you realize, okay, I have a fear of conflict and I don't want to cause conflict, but I need to speak out and I need to speak up about this. So it gets you out of that box and gets you out of your comfort zone and helps you to grow, which is what we want to do. We
yeah,
don't want to stay where we're at. So I think that's one of the great things about the Enneagram is it allows you to grow in who you are and to become a better, more well-rounded person and to get out of those some of those fears and to step out and get healthy.
yeah, and that's the key thing that I look at too is get healthy. Um, be like even like you're saying, you have that fear of conflict. So you want to try and avoid that at any cost, but yet at certain points in time in your life, there comes a point where you need to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you're just shying away from that all the time, you can get run over by whoever. Um,
Right.
so
Yeah.
understanding, okay, this is one of my weaknesses. I need to, work on this, become
Mhm.
stronger in this, need to take up for myself,
Right.
and, be able to speak my truth, and, not let somebody dictate necessarily how my life is going to go or whatever.
Mhm.
That's a huge thing. That's a huge thing for many people who have an introverted element about themselves. They
Mhm.
they don't want to do those types of things. They don't want to stand up for themselves. They would just rather kind of just cower back to the corner of the room.
Withdraw.
Yeah,
Withdraw. Sure.
exactly. Exactly. So I think it's very helpful from that perspective. Um, with that, you're a 9. What is your wings and how do those affect you as well?
Yes. So the wing, it's numbers 1 through 9. So you're going to fall somewhere in there. And I am a 9. So the numbers on either side is 8 and 1. So with 1 being more of a organized, perfectionistic type that can kind of see where things can go wrong and maybe good at fixing things where there's an issue, you know, there's that. And then on the other side is an 8 wing, which is super, I don't want to say super, but generally stands firm in their beliefs and what they think and what they know. They're very honest, they're very open, and very direct. So that is almost the opposite of my personality.
Right,
so,
right.
so in learning that about myself and deciding, okay, am I more of a 1 wing or an 8 wing? I feel like I have a little bit of both, but lean more towards the 8 because I am not necessarily overly organized or structured or that sort of thing, which ones definitely love that structure and lists and that. I lean more towards protecting the people I care about and I'll stand in the gap for them. For instance, the foster.
Yeah,
So I do when I get to a certain point, I'm like, okay, I'm standing in the gap for these people, and you can't push me down or push me over. And this is what I believe, and this is what I think, and I will tell you my truth. And most of the time, it is for other people, not necessarily standing in the gap for myself, is simply because I don't. I, I don't want the conflict for myself.
Right.
So I'll stand and I'll deal with the conflict for somebody else, but not for me.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, it's almost like opposite of what my personality is, but I'm learning. So that's one way those wings can, affect your personality.
Right.
So yeah, really interesting.
For sure. For sure. And once you started seeing this, you read the book, you thought, oh, this is very interesting. I think I might want to do something with this. You made the decision to go ahead and get certified as a coach. What was that process like?
So it was quite a few classes to go through, and it is a lot of information, but the information, like we said, is simplistic. So it builds on itself, and there's even more to know, to absorb and soak it all in and think it through. But I went through the classes. It took me a couple months to get through everything and enjoyed it. So interesting, finding out about all the numbers and how everybody's wired. And so I was able to get my certification. And once I did that, I was like, I think I am ready to do some individual coaching. Now, for me, individual coaching was much more palatable because it's working one on one, which is easier for me than going into a company and helping them work their teams work together, or helping them be in unity and understanding each other. So I started off with individual coaching. So
Right, right. And one of the first things that you wanted to do was you wanted to work with a couple of different people as guinea pigs.
yep.
And,
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for
yeah.
being
And I ended up being one of those.
you did.
But what's interesting was the fact that when Tom first told me you guys were uh, on a trip up here to Michigan for a visit, I believe is when it would happen that he told me that you were doing it. And I immediately said, I want to work with her. I want to know what it is. I want to understand it. I want to help her out. I want to be able to give you feedback from all the years of being in psychiatry sessions and
Mhm.
cognitive therapy and different things like that that I've dealt with the depression and anxiety over the years. Um, but I wanted to be able to give you comparative uh, scenarios of what I experienced with understanding all of that type of stuff in relation to what you are about to start coaching people on. So we went through that process, and if I'm correct, I believe we figured out that I was a number 5
Mhm.
with a wing 4.
Yes, that is correct.
And so with that, can you just give the audience just a little bit of perspective on what a 5 is and then why that wing comes in for me?
Yes. So with the five, you have someone who has big boundaries. They like to reserve their energies, a fear of being depleted of energy. So there's that little bit of wall there that they tend to put up just to be careful not to be depleted. And actually, they do get depleted. So anytime fives spend a lot of time with people, they do need to pull back and take time to recharge and regain that strength back, regain that energy back from, being with people. So if you come across somebody that is like, well, they're all the time gone, or hiding out in their bunker or whatever, it's they're recharging. They just need that to recharge and be be able to come back with the energy that they want to have. So that's one thing. And they set those boundaries for themselves, hopefully, that they can set those boundaries for themselves. So that's a little bit about a five. A five loves to dive into information. So if there's something interesting to them, they are going to dive in and find out everything they can about it and just dig, dig, dig. And so I love that so much about a five. You'll find because of that, fives can often be your inventors. They can often be the people who win those Nobel Prizes for coming up with these amazing, because they are in such the thought process of digging deep and wanting to understand why things work the way they do. So they're very much in your thinking and your thought process of that number. Moving to the wing of four, which a five is in the withdrawn category and a four is also in the withdrawn category. So both five and four and nine, which is my number, tend to pull back. They need to pull back to have that space to recharge, to be quiet, to go into themselves when dealing with social, when dealing with other people. They need that time. So it's very important. Now, having a five with a wing of four, then you get a double whammy of it. And so you're double withdrawing and pulling back, which is good, which is okay. And I think sometimes people who have those numbers think, well, what's wrong with me? Why don't I want to be with people? But naturally inside, that's healthy for you to take that time to recharge and pull back.
Yeah.
So being four and in the withdrawn category, fours tend to be your creatives. So they are super creative people. They love to dive deep into feelings and why people are feeling maybe difficult or sad. If you have a four that's a friend and you're going through something that's hard, they're going to be there to listen to you, understand, and help talk you through it and say, it's okay and all that sort of thing. Whereas if there's another number, it might be, for instance, a number seven who is in an optimistic triad. They're going to be like, well, everything will be okay. We can move forward. It's going to be great. So you have, those are the different types of personalities, but the four will sit with you and be in the sadness with you, and they will be in the understanding place that you need at that point.
Yeah.
So their emotions are very deep. They have a wide range of emotions, and so you get that, and that's why you get a lot of the artistic creative side, because they do dig a little bit deeper into emotion. So when writing poetry or music artistically, you're going to get a more deeper and creative type, and that's why a lot of artists are fours. A lot of writers, musicians, going to the arts, you'll find a lot of them as fours.
Yeah. And what was interesting when we kind of deciphered that about me was that I had not too long before that had come to the realization of the word empath.
Mm-hmm.
And being an empath, being somebody who is able to sense energy, feel energy, affected by energy, of being around people, being in large crowds, different things like that. It
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, now it even makes more sense of the fact that I am an empath, and I'm an empath that understands different things. And I'm also empathetic to
Mm-hmm.
other people.
Yeah.
I can feel their emotion. I can listen to what they're going through. I can empathize with that. Um, and so that was another element where it was like, okay, I've got this information over here. Now I got some more information that supports that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are the types of things that help people be able to understand themselves, be able to shift into periods of growth where
Mm-hmm.
they can work on those weaknesses and, bring those up to a more solid foundation, or they can realize, all right, no, I do need to retreat and recharge. I need to seclude. I need to get away so I can get back to a working, functioning body that I can help others, which has also been an interesting thing for me with shifting into this new role myself as an artist lifestyle coach, which I've just come up with that name on my own. I didn't even think that's a real thing outside of,
I think it should be. I love it.
I don't think it's a real thing outside of the fact that I've created it. So I'm going to make it real.
There you
Um,
go.
but also too, doing these podcast episodes and interviewing people, I'm feeling a sense of comfortability in doing it because it's one-on-one. Um, and at times it's no more than three, whether I'm interviewing a couple or just an individual. But I'm finding the interesting comfort of that as another form of me being creative. It's listening to people's stories,
Mhm.
pulling different elements out of their stories that connect over timelines throughout their lives and reflecting that back to them, but also too allowing that story to be heard by other people so that it maybe helps them as well.
Right.
So that was another thing that was very fascinating with me working with you as the guinea pig to help you get a little bit of confidence, that more of that confidence to do what you're doing, give you some of that experience right off the bat of working with somebody. But then with that understanding for me moving forward and then shifting into this phase, um, also made me want to have you on and have your story told and also let people understand what the Enneagram is so they can, potentially either reach out to you or anybody else in regards to trying to understand that about themselves and have more understanding of that.
Right. Well, there is a lot of information out there about it. So if you're just getting started out, it's just easy to get information. And I will say it's so helpful because so many times as we're going through life, we find ourselves saying, well, why am I like this? Or why can't I be like that? Or I wish I had this. There's some numbers that are going to do that more than others, but it can get frustrating. It can frustrate yourself. And there are things that you would say, I want to change this about my personality. Why do I have to have this? But knowing that you're wired, to be that way gives comfort.
Yeah.
It gives understanding. And not only that, to see the positive side of it. Okay, so now that you know as a five, you have to pull back to recharge and re energize, and not to say, well, I know I should probably be with people, but I just don't want to be with people. Well, that's the reason. You need that to recharge. And so now to say it's not a bad thing, you know, it's just the way I'm wired, and pulling back and withdrawing is okay,
Yeah.
and I'm okay in being able to do that. So, and across the board with all the numbers, there's always going to be something that you're looking at somebody else and why can't I be more optimistic, or why can't I be more organized, or why, and they're all wired that way. They're
Yeah.
wired like that. And so not to look at them, but to look inside, knowing more and learning more about yourself and say, okay, how can I take this, knowing for me, knowing that I don't like conflict, but to get out of that and speak out, or whatever it may be,
Right.
so to grow yourself and not to always desire to have those other traits that everybody else has.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I found very fascinating too, and I want the audience to um, have is potentially an opportunity is being able, if they decide they want to work with you, I'm going to have the links in the show notes as well as they can always go to the website and go into the resources tab, and there's a link for you there.
Mhm.
But I wanted to let them know the fact that because of your background, because of you having that psychology minor, you understand an element that is a little bit different than most people that are working with the Enneagram. also to the fact that you've been a teacher for so many years to students, to young people. You have a huge heart of wanting to help people. And so that gives you a little bit of more of a credentialed element from my perspective, um, to being an Enneagram coach and allowing people to understand that this is a safe person to work with. This is a person that's not going to judge you. This is a person who is going to empathize with you and help you to understand some different elements about yourself and also be a great coach and mentor, if you decide to work with Wendy. So I just wanted to make that statement, at this point because it's super important to be able to draw those lines, um, from people's stories up to present day. With doing what you're doing, you mentioned earlier on with, some pre-conversation that we had, that you're working with some corporate, clients as well. Can
Mhm.
you share a little bit of what that's like and how you're seeing the potentials within that realm?
Yeah, so I think and I think it more of it started during COVID, where, we were so pulled back from each other and everything and it's almost like when we came back together, it was a little bit discombobulated and bringing unity and bringing teamwork and all of that became important.
Yeah,
Having harmony and health in the office became important.
right.
And so that's kind of how I got looking into helping out corporations and different businesses is simply because you're only as healthy as your leader, for one thing,
Yeah,
and if the leader doesn't know or is not healthy or does not able to understand everybody's perspective, it's going to be a rough place to work.
yeah,
So bringing harmony into the workplace became important. And so I've been able to go into different businesses, and most of them on the smaller scale, but help them learn about their numbers, how to work with the numbers, understanding each other and the numbers and who they are actually working with. It opens a whole new world, to be honest.
yeah,
It allows them to show a little more grace to each other, knowing, okay, so this is the reason why they did that. And that makes so much more sense now
yeah,
because we tend to actually put expectations on other people who we think, okay, this is the way that I would do it. Why aren't they doing it that way? Right? We
yeah,
do that all the time.
yeah,
That's not the way they're wired. So going into those places and helping them realize all of that is super helpful. And it brings health, it brings community, it brings a lot of unity and understanding when it comes to teamwork.
yeah,
I've enjoyed doing it. It's been a lot of fun. And I think that ultimately they are seeing positive things come out of it. And I don't know why you wouldn't,
yeah.
but yeah, it's just really super helpful to understand the types that you're working with. So,
Yeah, that's very cool too, the fact that you're doing that with businesses because I think one of the key people that I've paid attention to, over the last 8 years, is Gary Vaynerchuk. And anybody that's on the internet kind of knows who Gary is, and especially in the marketing advertising world. And one of the things that he's implemented within his business structure is he has a chief heart officer. And that particular person's role is to make sure that they're looking at the employees, looking at this internal dynamics of the company, and making sure that those, employees and individuals within his C-suites and different things like that, there's an element of compassion that's implemented within the structure of the company automatically.
mhm.
And I think that's a huge element that people could look at the Enneagram as, someone like yourself being able to be an asset to the business, how they run their business, how they integrate with their employees, how they support their employees, um, and also to just having a smoother, um, flowing community within the company. Because if you don't have a company where your employees are invested into the business, especially if it's an agency scenario, like an advertising agency or branding agency, any type of creative agencies. If you don't have an element where the people that are working with the CEO or the head of the agency, the creative director, if you don't have that investment from them, you're not going to be able to serve your clients well.
Yeah. Right. No.
And being able to just understand them a little bit better from another perspective with
Mhm.
using the Enneagram, which is, you get to know them personally without necessarily having to sit down and have a 5 hour conversation of tell me your life story
Right.
before I decide to hire you, or now that I've hired you, tell me your 5 hour story.
Right.
Um, you can get some of that information quickly and get an understanding of, okay, this person operates this way.
Mhm.
So this position may not be the best one, but this one over here, they can really excel in. And
Yes.
that was one of the things that I learned early on in my working career, being a restaurant manager, was the fact that I had to learn very quickly whether the person's personality would be great to have them on the register addressing the customers, or it would be better off having them over here helping prepare the food where they don't have to interact with the customers
Right.
and they're more comfortable in doing their work.
Yeah.
So that's where I find these elements hugely important and being able to create a better working environment, creating a better community of support around businesses and different things like that, and
Mhm.
or just an individual that's working on their own potentially,
Right.
or just wants to understand themselves better, um,
Right.
understand why they react the way they do, why they are functioning this way, and this other thing over here is bothering them. It just doesn't click for them. But figuring those things out with someone like yourself will alleviate a whole lot of stress and kind of wipe the fog off of the eyes of
Yeah.
life for them.
It does. It really does. And even, not only yourself, and you can truly take a deep dive, and I'm still learning things. If you can go as far as you want to go, but also like the people that are closest to you,
Yeah,
the people who you want to have those good relationships with, it's important to know who their core person is. And once you know their core, helps you understand where they're coming from and why they're choosing to make those decisions. I will say, like, any newly married couple, I would highly suggest this. Going into a new marriage and you think and then you're like, what?
right.
Why? You know,
Yeah,
super helpful, in understanding your partner. And so that alone, understanding children, the people, again, those closest relationships to you, and then the working relationship. So, so important, especially in these days where it's really crazy, and everybody seems crazy sometimes.
yeah,
Um, just to have a healthy working environment, and you'll get more production that way. People will be happy to be there. You'll understand. You'll be able to click, and things will be smooth. It's really important for sure.
yeah, definitely. And I think that might be a great spot for us to close out today. Wendy, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your story, letting people get to know who you are. Um, and for the audience, always remember, listen to your heart and be kind to your mind. Thank you.
Thank you.